we've got Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp complaining about the Premier League TV schedule, and it's not the first time. And while they're not wrong, they need to be careful not to bite the hand that feeds them. We're going to talk about that next here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. Welcome back to Pints and Punditry here at the Pitchside Pub. Today we're going to talk about the Premier League TV schedule and the congestion it causes and the weird game times, weird from traditional standpoints, that has managers and players, I'm sure, sort of fuming right now. And we got comments from Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola both saying it is holding them back in Europe. And I'm not sure I quite buy it. So we're going to talk about that today, but before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get in that comment section. What do you think? Is this just a lot of hot air? Is this excuse making? Or is it very legitimate? Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So this really stemmed from Jurgen Klopp, who has for a long time complained about the fixture schedule in the Premier League. His hatred of the early games is very well known, and I've never really liked that. And I love Jurgen Klopp. I think he's a fantastic leader and a great coach, but his constant whining about playing the early game has become just pure excuse making that you don't typically see from strong leaders. So I've never liked that. And now the claim is that the scheduling, particularly with TNT now being involved, and the say that they have in the Premier League schedule, is hurting Premier League teams when it comes to competing in Europe. And to take it a step further, Pep Guardiola was asked about Jurgen Klopp's comments, and he was pretty forthright that he agreed. And it's not that Klopp and Pep never agree. They have a long-standing respect for one another, but there have been many occasions where Klopp has popped off about something and Pep sort of just goes, well, you know, I understand what he's saying, but I don't really want to get into it. But in this case, he actually said the same thing. So you have two of the most, if not the two, most prominent managers and most accomplished managers in the Premier League, if not in Europe, certainly in that conversation, openly stating in no uncertain terms that it is the Premier League TV schedule, particularly TNT's influence in it, that is hurting them in Europe. And it's not that I think they're wrong, but they've got to be careful not to bite the hand that feeds them here. Because without those TV contracts, you don't have the money you have. Those TV contracts are how you compete in Europe. They are how the Premier League across the board can compete in Europe, because they have more money than anybody else. Now, the issue here is it doesn't make as much of an impact for the top level teams, the Man Cities, the Liverpools, because they're competing at a level in Europe against the Bayern Munichs and the Real Madrids and the PSGs, who also have a ton of money despite their leagues not having nearly as lucrative television contracts. Now, yes, I know Liverpool was in the Europa League this year, so they didn't directly compete with those clubs in Europe this year, but that is still who they're competing with. They see themselves, and correctly so, in that upper echelon. So the television contract for the Premier League that gives all of its teams a ton more money, both the equitable distribution that everybody gets and also more for finishing higher, that doesn't have the separating impact for them that it does for the mid-tier teams. So when you have your West Hams and your Aston Villas competing in the Conference League, they are so much wealthier than the teams they're competing against, and their wage bills are higher, and their ability to go get talent on the transfer market. In fact, they are acquiring players from the teams they're playing against in the Conference League. And so that's where the real advantage is. But the big teams have to remember where their money comes from. Liverpool. Fenway Sports Group is not going to go in debt so you can rebuild your roster in one transfer window, in one summer like you did last year with McAllister and Gravenberch and all these guys that you've added over the years. And Liverpool is not the most wildly free-spending team, but clearly they are a wealthy club and can go out and do what they need to do. And they were able to rebuild their club basically in one summer. That's because of the Premier League's television contract. It's not because Fenway Sports Group is tripping over themselves to run this club at a loss. Man City, you could run at a loss because you're owned by the Abu Dhabi royal family, but you're not allowed to. And why was it that a wealthy beyond wealthy royal family from a Gulf nation state wanted to buy you in the first place? It's because Premier League teams have wildly inflated values because of the television contract. So sure, maybe you have wealthy owners who would spend, endless amounts of money if they were allowed to by FFP rules, and you can argue whether they have or not. That's a different conversation. But they wouldn't own your club if it weren't for these lucrative contracts. They wouldn't have been interested in Manchester City if it wasn't for the Premier League's incredibly rich television contract and the exposure that comes with that. So that's how you got your money in the first place. That's how now within the profitability and sustainability rules, you're allowed to go out and offer Erling Haaland higher wages than anybody else. He had the transfer fee that was set in stone. The release clause is the word I'm looking for. He had that, so anybody could have gotten him for the right price, but Manchester City offered him wildly more weekly wages than anybody else. Well, why were you able to do that? Because you make so much money from your television contracts. That's how you could get him over Real Madrid or Bayern Munich or any of the other clubs that wanted him. So while Pep and Klopp are not wrong, they're being naive here to ignore the fact that it is those television contracts, the ones that you are now saying are hurting you in Europe. And I understand their case, but it is those television contracts that allow you to spend the money on the players you have in the first place. Without those contracts, I don't know if you're getting to Europe. And if you do get to Europe, because 4 teams have to go from the Premier League anyway, you're not going to be as competitive because you don't have the money for the players. You can't keep a Bernardo Silva. You can't keep a Mo Salah, even though Saudi Arabia is offering hundreds of millions of dollars for him. You can't do these things. And so they need to be careful not to bite the hand that feeds them. Not that there's going to be any repercussions. They have no control over the TV contracts whatsoever, which, if you're playing three-dimensional chess, is probably why they can come out and say these things. They know what I'm saying. I'm not breaking new ground here, but they can say them because nothing's going to change, so now it makes an excuse for them. And maybe it gets Liverpool one less early game down the road. Not that that affects Klopp anyway, he's retiring. But they're not naive enough to lack understanding of what I'm saying. But this does scream a little bit of hypocrisy to be complaining about the Premier League television contracts while paying players exorbitant amounts of money thanks to those contracts. So I don't quite buy what they're selling. I think they need to be careful because they are 100% biting the hand that feeds them. But I would love your comments. Get down in that comment section below. Let me know what you think. You can leave some comments on Twitter as well at Pitchside Pub. While you're here, hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can get updates on all of our videos, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.